Andrei, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I've been following you on LinkedIn. Um, I'm a believer in the framework that you offer as far as the foundational ABM strategies and how to make things happen for a lot of marketers like myself. I've been running ABM for a long time, but I would love for you to just introduce yourself, tell us what you do, tell us about your framework, how you guys make things happen, and we'll go from there.
Thanks for inviting me, Nadia. I appreciate the time we can spend together and talk about account-based marketing. So I'm co-founder of a company called fullfunnel.io. We provide full funnel B2B marketing consulting, which in a nutshell, we help B2B companies with long sales cycles and those that are selling high ticket products to implement a holistic account-based marketing and demand generation motions to not only drive, as you said, behind the scenes, not only to drive the leads, but holistically create awareness on your target market, generate future pipeline, generate demand for your product, and activate strategic enterprise accounts with fully personalized journeys.
Wow, it sounds like you've said that a time or two before, huh? You know what? Let's start here. I think a lot of people truly believe that the concept of account-based marketing is not a brand new concept. Historically, sales teams had their list of target accounts or their white space accounts, the big top 10, top 20 that they would go after. So what changed now when there's like this popular demand for account-based marketing in organizations, when in reality, this has always been the approach within B2B? Because we don't sell to everyone. Our solutions are so niched. What's different now?
Yeah, so if you look at the history of B2B marketing, back to the days, as you said, everything was account-based. Literally, you had your target addressable market, and in companies that facilitated, let's say, good practices or best practices, their sales people were not just junior SDRs that are supposed to, spam everybody on LinkedIn and send thousands of emails trying to book the discovery calls. On contrary, these were the subject matter experts, or if you will, the trusted advisors that could advise and consult their clients. They could address multiple questions, and this is the sales process, especially we are talking obviously about enterprise high ticket deals, right? The sales process was always consultative. Now, we are living in AI era, right? And 10 years ago, everything became everything was shifting to the tech landscape. And obviously we started, like, let's say 15, 20 years ago, we started to observe the growth of platforms like HubSpot, Airbnb, Dropbox, etc. And I'm referring to the old good days when, when you were learning marketing, you were hearing the stories about Coca-Cola, Procter & Gamble, PepsiCo. These were the marketing legends, right? Nowadays,
Delta, everything.
yeah, exactly. But nowadays, everybody learns about HubSpot, Dropbox, etc. And this creates a false perception that there is an easy way to grow. Everybody doesn't investigate the playbook that these companies created, and they even don't question that these are the solutions that not all of them are in B2B. That's the first one. And the second one, that these are not the enterprise solutions, right? That's the problem. Now, the marketing landscape evolved, and we started to see the rise of ABM platforms. And the problem here, I'm not judging anybody here, but the problem is that if you want to promote the ABM platform, right, you need to reinvent, let's say, the wheel, and you need to say that there is kind of a false opportunity to target thousands of accounts, right? So which is called one-to-many. These concepts like one-to-few, one-to-one, and one-to-many, they existed. The problem is that with the platforms, they promised what the companies wanted to hear, that there is an easy way to target thousands of strategic accounts, and there is an easy and scalable playbook. Run display programmatic ads, do the kind of semi-personalized outbound, and here you go, right? So this is where we end up with the boom for ABM, and obviously the boom came out of another era of predictable growth vehicle, right? So again, 15 years ago, aside from this growth hacking stories, there was this predictable revenue model, and companies they were buying it in, and this is also what investors wanted, right? An easy playbook, just high SDRs. A marketer should play the MQL game or MQA, doesn't really matter, right? And here you go. It's scalable, it's predictable, it's measurable, and it's linear, right? And that means you put dollar in, you get $2 out. This was the design. The problem, though, the buyer journey, especially enterprise buyer journey, is way more complicated, right? And if you'll speak to any enterprise buyer, the you'll always hear that they prioritize vendors way before the strategic initiative is approved, or way before the, let's say, strategic challenge occurs at these companies that triggers their buying process. That's the biggest issue. Now, if we look at everything what I have said, and we'll try to summarize, indeed, account-based marketing was here forever. But the difference was that back to the days, it was always in one-to-few and one-on-one format, especially for enterprise accounts, right? And it was always a process where you invest your resources into mapping out the buying committee, engaging the buying committee, running in-depth account research to understand the needs of that account, and then every individual inside the buying committee, and that map out the solutions for these people. I would love to emphasize on that part, solutions, that you come not as, we help companies like yours with X, Y, and Z. No, you come and say, hey, here's what we know about your needs. These are your strategic initiatives, and these are, for example, your jobs to be done and KPIs. And these are an idea, or let's say this is the list of ideas how that could be improved, refined, solved, etc. Right? And this is the consultation in a nutshell. So indeed, that was always forever. But this is A, time-consuming, and B, there is a lot of manual work. And this is what not B2B companies want,
And
unfortunately.
actually, that's what I was, yeah, that's what I was going to comment on. So somebody offered the easy button to the market. And that's what we want. We marketers chase the shiny object. If you told me that today I could do my job in 10 times easier, 10 times faster, 10 times cheaper, maybe reaching the right people, I would totally buy into that. So creating that need and then convincing everyone that they got a problem, as in reaching all of the accounts in an automated fashion through technology that all you have to do is just buy it and you're golden. I feel like that's the golden definition of how marketing should work for a college course, Marketing 101, and somebody figured out and made it happen. And yet here we are today, still dealing with complexities and one-to-one and multi-channel, trying to stitch it all together, all the touches in the universe of we did this and then we did that, and we did more offline than online. And the technology and the era of technology can't measure stuff that's offline. How do you guys solve those kind of issues for your clients who want to kind of aggregate all of that buyer journey from all of the unique individual, sometimes manual touches that you implement within those ABM programs?
It all starts with understanding if ABM is a fit for your organization, right? That's the first thing. Because again, what we have just discussed, what many companies consider as account-based marketing, in a nutshell, is the same typical lead generation, but in a new wrapping, if you will. So the difference
programmatic
is that,
advertising at scale.
yeah, exactly. But so just literally getting a wish list of accounts from sales and then running ads and doing the same outbound. So nothing different from the traditional lead gen, aside from the fact that you have the list of these accounts, right, mapped out by sales. So ABM obviously is not a silver bullet, and it just makes sense only when ROI is significant. right? That means that your contract value should be high enough to justify the investment into this program, not technology, but in the program, right? So your marketing, sales, and other units, we can discuss the responsibilities, will be dependent on the team structure and size, will be involved into that cross-functional collaboration. So that's the first one. Second, it makes sense if you have long sales cycles, right? If your sales cycle is short and transactional, then it just makes no sense. You need to refine your demand generation and demand capturing mechanisms. Lastly, if your sales process is complex, right, or if which means that you need to do a lot of consultations to be able to sell your product, then ABM is the perfect fit. And or another criteria could be if your market is limited to X number of accounts. So like in my case, back to the days when I was working at Kimberly-Clark, we didn't have HubSpot, 6sense, or any platform.
Is that when the dinosaurs roamed the
Yeah.
earth?
Yeah, exactly. Back to these days. And our market was limited to 50 plus strategic retail chains. And the annual contract varied from 200K to 50 millions of dollars, just to give the reference, right? And then it means that every time all the engagement is manual. If you don't do the proper job, it can cost you millions in lost revenue. And when people ask where did I learn it, I actually learned it in the trenches by doing it.
Yeah, no pressure, but a lot of pressure.
Yeah, but doing it practically. So back to that story, right? We just need to understand that these are the criteria when it comes if ABM is the right fit. Next, you need to understand the stages of developing ABM motion, right? Again, because of that either misunderstanding that it's kind of a new version of lead gen that you can have thousands of accounts and now it's called ABM, you can run kind of the massive program. And I feel this is where a lot of companies fall down, basically fail their programs. Marketers purchase the software because the software also gives another bad promise to sales that they could identify the in-market accounts. You'll never be able to identify in-market enterprise accounts until you will be talking to them, until you'll be developing the relationship with the buying committee. Aside from those that make public tenders and suggest RFPs, so that's a different story. You need to start with the pilot program before you overinvest in the program. Before you try to involve everybody from your company, you need to run a small scope pilot program that serves you as a proof of concept. So there would be lots of new actions that marketing and sales should be doing together. Again, some of them we have already covered. There would be tons of manual touch points with the buying committee groups of the strategic accounts, right? And obviously, if you come and present it to the bigger group, you'll see the resistance, and you'll see the resistance from sales. You'll hear lots of questions. You'll start listening to the concerns as like it's not scalable, or how we can ensure that we'll hit our pipeline targets, etc., etc. So you always should start with small scope pilot program. You just need to involve one friendly sales rep and define maybe just a very simple playbook. We're not talking about the entire motion. But the key point is that then you start deploying it, you start cross-sharing the wins, and these wins could be the account engagement, the conversations that are happening, in ideal scenario, discovery calls booked, etc., right? Then apparently you can create the presentation for the entire group and explain, hey, here's the small playbook that we were running. Now we want to operationalize it and scale our success, right? So from that perspective, in some sense, the proof of concept, if you are not doing ABM for years, in most cases, this would be trial and error approach, right? So you'll see what works, you'll experiment with a few things. If you have years of experience, then you definitely have playbooks in place. But in other scenario, if what you need to do is just to make sure that you identify the activities that actually influence the buying process that work, and you operationalize them, which means you create clear structured process, not just something like, hey, let's go and post on LinkedIn, hey, or let's try to send this message to this buying committee member, right? No random acts of marketing, no experiments, but a clear structured process. This is the operationalization stage, because if you want to onboard other people from your team, and especially if you're working corporate, that's completely different story. You need to create a fully operationalized playbook for one business unit or department. And lastly, when you successfully deploy this cross-functional collaboration, because there would be multiple things, changing the ownership, structuring who is structuring the team and the responsibilities, who owns specific part of the process, who owns specific metrics, how often do we meet to review our processes, etc. Right? So these are the keys. When you fully operationalize it, now you are ready to scale. You can scale it to other business units, you can scale it to your regional teams, etc. You have the central playbook that you can adjust to the reality of the new department, business unit, or that region, right? So that's the key. Most companies skip this and they try to go to the scaling phase, but scaling, again, they look at scaling not in the way how I described. They look at scaling, okay, so we can just involve more accounts, we can build, instead of like 10 accounts, let's target thousands of them, right? And call it ABM. So in reality, this is the biggest problem. So we always explain these things first, right? Next, when it comes to pilot, you asked about the strategy. So I think, and it's this is the process that everybody can run internally. First, when you want to run the pilot program, you need to align it with the current strategic initiatives and challenges. Let's say your biggest problem is that you clearly see that you are missing pipeline and revenue targets, right? So then from that perspective, what would be the easiest win for us? Would it be pipeline acceleration? Right, so maybe helping sitting down together with this friendly sales rep and helping him or her to close these deals faster, right? Maybe it's expansion, so you know that there are clients where you have low wallet share and there is a huge opportunity, you know their needs, and there is a huge opportunity to upsell or cross-sell to these accounts, right? Or maybe because there is a pressure from investors, parent company, I don't know, head office, let's say, the pressure is to show that you can generate new pipeline, then obviously you define that this is your target. You should never start pilot that is controversial to the strategic goals and the current go-to-market challenges. That's the key. Next, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, there are interesting things that you mentioned, which I think a lot of people take for granted. One is that it takes a village to deploy an ABM program, and two is that it's rooted in partnership across departments and trust. And I feel like the more or the bigger the organization is, the harder it is to find this alignment between teams and to foster trust. And, coming from the customer side of Caliber Mind, and we're the name of the game within enterprise attribution, and tying those strategic initiatives to revenue, either pre-pipe or post-pipe, and dealing with these complexities within, data structures and whatnot. Coming from the customer side of Caliber Mind, that was the challenge that I always ran up against. How do I convince the sales organization, which historically has been extremely numbers-driven organization, because you either have revenue or you have pipe or you don't. It's like black and white, right? For marketing, it's different. We find values in clicks. We find values in impressions, like it's a division exercise that we're so conditioned to do, dealing with this messy data. But finding ways to convince the other side that we should collaborate, we should come together and show them something tangible of how things are changing before there's pipe or before there's something that's material, right? I find that to be a challenge, the very challenge that we help customers solve. But I wonder if you see that as a challenge too, buying that trust before something starts materializing.
It's absolutely true. And I would say that every B2B company where teams historically work in silos experience this challenge. There is no way that they don't experience this. And like you said, the silo starts from the different goals, objectives, and revenue responsibility. If marketing is just responsible for clicks, for brand value awareness, and not responsible for pipeline and revenue generation, then sales always treat them as the arts and crafts department, cost center / arts and crafts department. As simple as that, right?
A very sad place to be.
Yeah. So I mean, in the majority of corporations, this is how marketing historically works. In SMBs, that's not usually the case. Even if that was the case, I know that's the mindset shifts, and more B2B companies challenge marketing teams to be revenue responsible. And this is where the challenge starts, right? Now you need to persuade, now you need to gain trust from sales. So from that perspective, that's why I mentioned the pilot program, and that the pilot, you always start with just one sales rep, and this shouldn't necessarily be the most experienced sales rep, right? It should be the sales rep that is willing to collaborate. That's the key. Because if there is no desire to collaborate or even listen or even to speak to marketing, then honestly, you have only one opportunity, and just do it on your own. Take sales responsibility, do it, and prove the concept, right? Show that it actually works. Otherwise, you find one friendly sales rep and you start talking about the goals, about the existing processes that this sales rep runs, right? About the bottlenecks and the challenges that this sales rep observes, the root reasons, right? Quite often you'll hear same things. The patterns would be the same. So lack of awareness among the buying committee members. Why? Because there is pipeline coverage pressure, and they usually focus on the decision makers, right? There is mindset, hey, sell to the decision makers. They don't create coverage they don't build actually the champions. They don't engage with the other buying committee roles. So they would tell you this. They would claim maybe the problem that there is maybe there is lack of collateral nurturing content that helps to facilitate the deals, right? So the drop off happens after the discovery calls. So it could be a couple of things. So from that perspective, you start thinking out loud, what could be the most value added activities that we can run together, but that shouldn't be super complicated for everybody, right? Because the pilot in this case would be more like a side project, if you will, right? So you need to do it alongside other responsibilities. So what that could be, you define several, let's say, several activities that you can run together that are more or less integrated to existing processes. So for example, if your company runs in-person events, right, then just to give you an idea, you sit down together and say, hey, look, what if we'll just tweak the agenda of this in-person event to what would be the key points that we need to discuss to your strategic accounts. I'm oversimplifying this right now, but just want to make an idea. Okay, what these people don't know about the topic that we are going to cover, or what are their kind of misbeliefs, right? This, and that. Perfect. What would be the ideal outcome for the event attendee, right? What's they should come with after this event? This, and that. That's fine. Cool. What do you think? What if I will help you? For example, we'll define together what are the characteristics of the accounts that are the best fit for this event. This is the characteristic. Okay, let's find these accounts. Let's build this list together. And also, let's look if there is anything in our pipeline. And if marketing was playing this MQL game, you can say, hey, I will just look among the contacts that maybe historically engaged in some format with us, right? Okay, these are these accounts. Cool. What if I will create a few pieces of content that cover these topics for you, so you'll be able to facilitate, conversations, share from your, let's say, LinkedIn profile, send this in private messages to these people, try to validate if that resonates. So we want to embed this feedback loop. And again, you see how I'm integrating the content production process, right? And see if that resonates a lot with them. If yes, then you can invite them for this in-person event. After this in-person event, we can define together the most engaged accounts, and I can help you to create kind of personalized, let's say, content hubs or personalized offerings for these accounts that you can then later send to them and try to book the further engagements. So again,
sometimes it doesn't have to be even salespeople. It could be your SDR, your BDR, right?
Yeah,
Usually I've noticed the younger they are, the more coaching, more support, more direction and help they want from marketing, somebody to lean back on, somebody to get help from, somebody to, collaborate with. And what I love what you said about making marketing content work harder in that one-to-one scenario, whether it's a webinar on a specific topic, and you enable the BDR with a link saying, hey, go ask them if they're interested to learn about XYZ, because I know they have a problem. But the ask comes not through a marketing email saying, hey, everyone, join the webinar. We're going to have Andrei and Nadia discussing ABM, but rather, hey, company XYZ, I know you guys have tried putting an ABM platform in place and it failed. How about you join this webinar and just hear what people say in general, what makes these programs work or fail? I think it just creates a different dynamic, and it's a one-to-one conversation where there's more implied trust versus a marketing email in this scenario that we get so many of, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I would love to shift to the measurement side of ABM. And as a preamble to this side of the conversation, I was recently at a local roadshow event by Demandbase. They were here in Atlanta. It was a great workshop. It lasted about 3 hours. And it was structured from how do you select your target accounts, what programming can you run, and then it would go into measurement. And the measurement piece was the last one. There was like 45 minutes left before the end of the event. And I felt like that piece fell apart because it's so complex and it could be so controversial and it's so easy to poke holes because what you discussed includes a lot of manual elements, a lot of manual programming, notes, tasks in your CRM that got recorded by the sales rep, calls, I mean, you name it, right? And I feel like the industry has not figured out a good way to measure ABM at scale, to report on ABM at scale, for marketing leaders to truly tell stories of how is this ABM program performing, however small, however piloted it might be. And without a good marketing story, like there's nowhere to go unless you have that story to show success, right? So I'm curious on your take, like how do we go from instrumenting things, deploying them into the market, to actually measuring these things at scale, knowing that your ABM program has limitations, the things that happen offline, all of these manually entered things do not make it into your ABM program that just is designed to measure digital engagement, preferably from clicks and website visits, right? And yet so much of the one-to-one happens offline. So give me kind of your take on that.
So basically, you just need to create the dashboard that connects all the dots from the pipeline and revenue generation to specific account engagement, right? So you can go granular if needed, or you can always report on the most important metrics for your executives. And again, this always is the pipeline value and the revenue that is generated, right? That's the key. So if you think about ABM dashboards and measurement, right? Think about first of all, the holistic report that gives you the breakdown of revenue and pipeline generated from the key motions that you run. Let's say new pipeline, pipeline acceleration, expansion, and renewals or churn prevention, for example. Next, pipeline progress, right? You'll just look on, for example, ABM source deals. It's good because then you can always compare it to non-ABM motions, right? You can compare the revenue metrics like average contract value, the win rates, the sales cycle lengths, and in general, if you want, you can also present the sales pipeline velocity. That helps quite often. That helps to get more buy-in and support for ABM, right? When you do this comparison, so that's good. Next, your program performance. So that's purely depends on the outline of your program, right? What are the key activities, like we spoke? If you have this in-person events, right, then potentially the metrics could be the sign-ups for that event from the strategic accounts and break down by tiers, right? If that's something different, again, you just think about it. We have our unified report. I know that this is not what companies are used to, but I will give you an idea. First, we always look at 3 lists of accounts, and this is the process that we take at the beginning. We do the account prioritization, and we segment all the accounts that we have selected into 3 lists. Cluster ICP, these accounts that fit our ICP criteria, but they don't know us, and we have no idea what are their needs if they're in the market, right? So for us, the key goal is to create awareness first in these accounts. And by creating awareness, I mean that they should hit a specific or should match a specific engagement threshold. So this is not a kind of vague high level metric, right? So marketing and sales together define the tangible criteria for that engagement threshold. Next is the future pipeline accounts. So accounts that actually hit this engagement threshold. So we say that they know us, but we have no idea what are their needs. So this is where we invest sales resources, sales time into in-depth account research, buying committee mapping, buying committee engagement, right? And lastly, we have active focus accounts. So these are accounts that know us. We have a relationship with the buying committee, and we collected enough evidence that they have a need in our product. So we work on these personalized solutions and personalized offerings for these accounts. And we measure this holistically. We always explain it to everybody in the team, because the key is how fast you move accounts from one list to another, right? And then you can immediately see the metric that is not so popular, right? Account velocity. How fast you move account that has no idea that you exist to account with an actual sales opportunity, right? So this
Very
is
objective driven for each segment. Sounds like you have a very specific objective, what you want to do with this group,
exactly.
what you want to do with that group. And then each group gets or becomes a subset of the previous group, potentially, because the engagement intensity grows.
Exactly. And that makes perfect sense for sales, because obviously, I mean, that depends on personality, but normally everybody understands that if these accounts don't know you, you have no idea what are their needs, you're not likely to sell to them, right? That's the key. So that
I love
makes
it. Logic sales. Logic sells for sales, for sure.
exactly. Exactly. And then, I mean, then you define the other metrics would be the leading indicator. So again, depending on the program that you run, this could be whatever. The number of engagements with the target accounts in multiple formats, one-on-one messages, comments, whatever, invites to the event. There could be multiple things. So number of discovery calls booked and the total pipeline generated, right? One more report that, again, we always track. So I would love to highlight the sales responsibility in this process. Again, we call it account-based marketing, but in reality, this is the cross-functional playbook, right? And for sales, it's, again, would love to say that it depends on the playbook, but just to give you an idea, this could be personalized connection requests sent, non-sales touch points, conversation started, sign-ups for the event, whatever, right? To give you an idea, because these are the activities that are under our control, and our outputs or outcomes purely depend on our input. So if we just deprioritize it, if we don't do this value-added touch points, then we shouldn't be surprised at the end that we're not getting too much out of it. And lastly, again, 2 more kind of reports that are optional, but it's good to have them. Account engagement, so that's good to track, because then you can cross-share it internally. Replies to your engagement, right? You can track intent data and see if there is an increase, if there is a spike of engagement on your website from the set of the strategic accounts, right? Which means that somehow you're creating awareness if they're visiting your high intent pages, etc., right? And conversation started. So that's these are perfect metrics that you can leverage. Lastly, we use this internally, again, just to internally also with the clients, the account development process to avoid the let's say to avoid the situation when your program is more like random acts of marketing and sales. You need to create the statuses for the account development. What are the key statuses? So let's say account researched, buying committee mapped, initial engagement happened, personalized content created, personalized event invites were sent, etc. I'm just giving you the idea, right? So for every company that would be different. That means that both marketing and sales track the statuses, right? Not started, in progress, finished,
It's almost like
whatever.
a project management
Yeah,
exercise.
more or less in that sense, because then what you want to achieve is that you have holistic process how to engage these accounts, not just that we just enroll them into automated sequence, right? Or we just send a couple of messages on LinkedIn and nothing happens, so we just forgot about them. This is the reality for the majority of the companies. So what you do is that you define the core steps in the account development process, and you make sure that your team follows this process. So that's the key.
So there's definitely people, there's definitely processes, there are definitely programs. I'm almost going into the 4 Ps of marketing, but these are the 4 Ps of account-based marketing, right? In this case. And then there's the measurement piece. And I feel like the more metrics we have, the more difficult it is to aggregate them in one place without this continuous manual process, yet another P with an M, of aggregating them every so often, every week, every month. Do you guys recommend that there is a designated analyst or a person who's responsible for pulling all those metrics, aggregating them, ensuring it all comes into the same place? Or how do you kind of approach that side of things?
In ideal world, you need to have RevOps or MarOps function, right? So somebody who tracks all of this. And when we run ABM programs, we always install weekly review and planning meetings. So for these meetings, let's call it RevOps function, right? This person brings all of these insights, updates the metrics, brings the insights from the account engagement perspective, and both marketing and sales share the captured engagement as well. Why? Because what we want to avoid is the account blindness, right? That's the that we don't know and we don't share the captured engagement. So when we do all of this, then we can make as a team, as a cross-functional team, we can make a joint decision what would be the best next steps and actions to influence this specific account, right? That's the key. So in the bigger organizations, that shouldn't be a problem. Usually you have that person, so you need to onboard this person properly, be aligned on these key dashboards and metrics, then define the tracking or reporting frequency, if you will, and make sure that this person always brings these insights to the weekly meeting. Because again, if you don't turn this into the process, then you'll have a problem. Many companies have the technology in place. They purchase this technology, but quite often they don't create the processes around this. They forget that technology is not the process. Technology is the part of the process, right? So that's the main difference.
Yeah,
And
the line that there's too much data, not enough insights comes to mind. There's all these tools creating data, and yet we're still struggling to extract insights that are relevant, deliverable, and actionable on. So I love your point of designating processes and people responsible for them.
yeah, simple example, companies buy sales intelligence software or intent data in simple words, right? And then when I ask, like, so what's your process? How do you make sense of this intent data? How often do you track? Actually, all of our sales reps have access to this, so they always say they should log in and see and then do some follow-ups. As you guessed, that in reality.
Yep, and the sky is the limit of how many variations of the output come out of that, for sure. I want to touch on the concept that you mentioned earlier, accounts going through a funnel. The concept of this funnel is very interesting to me. And actually, when I was on the client side of Caliber Mind, running account-based marketing programs, having the ABM platform and running a lot of events-related stuff and webinar-related stuff, and looking for those insights that would tell me more about the interest within specific accounts, I noticed that the ABM platform gave me the account-based funnel from awareness to engagement to MQA, the stages that were predefined, hard-coded in the platform, right? But I also felt like I could not let go of the MQL funnel or the person funnel, because for marketing, understanding the journey of a person within the account was also important. So ultimately, MQL is not, in this case, a deliverable to the sales team, but rather it's a signal for the BDR or the AE to look at MQLs within an account that they're trying to break into and take that as the signal of the highest engagement within the account to reach out to start multi-threading. So ultimately, I was running two funnels, watching the velocity of people going through the funnel, and that's your old days typical lead to marketing lead to MQL to SAL to SQL, and then looking at the account funnel. But the account funnel would go beyond what the platform gives you and maybe defining the MQA stage, marketing qualified account, as an account with two MQLs or three MQLs, like gauging that people intensity within that account. And sometimes it's a challenge to run two funnels. Again, technology is part of it, knowledge is part of it. This is something that we help people with to set it up and run. But I'm curious on your take, watching people and their engagement and watching accounts and account level engagement together as part of your kind of ABM metrics tracking.
How we map out the buyer journey is absolutely misaligned with how that actually happens, right? So when they download the gated content or then visit your high intent page, quite often it doesn't mean that it's the buying intent as the software tells you, as with we have this misconception. It's just because out of the curiosity, and they say, "Oh, I just would love to see that what this product does," and that's it. And then you see, then sales rep starts to pitch on the discovery call, and these people start ghosting because that's a complete misalignment with their activity, right? So the key point here is that, and that's why our company is called Full Funnel. The key point is that you think about full funnel as the in terms of the buyer journey, which means that there is a very thin line between these activities, and you need to influence it holistically, right? All the stages, not the linear stages, but all the stages. You need to have operations in place, right, that influence the entire buyer journey, from creating awareness, generating demand, capturing that demand together with sales, qualifying these accounts, and we'll touch that part. Then creating personalized journeys for these accounts aligned with their current need, right, and level of demand. Then when the deal is closed, you start the client success, and then you start the expansion, right? These are all the holistic operations. So that's the key. And coming back to your point on measuring the engagement on account and contact level, yes, you need to do it two ways. You need to measure this on the contact and on the account level. But what is also essential is that together with sales, this is something that you need to do way before you start ABM program. You need to do two levels of alignment: go to market alignment, and then executional plus operational alignment, which means that you sit down together and define these definitions, the buyer journey stages, and the signals. There is, again, false promise that there is buying intent. Again, if you Google right now, there would be tons of platforms that will show you the buying intent. I will tell you the truth.
Definitions are everything. Definitions are everything. Define what you mean by MQL, intent, on and on and on, right? But you're right. Definitions are everything.
Exactly. So it's the only buying intent that exists is when your buyer tells you, "I want to buy your product, send me an invoice." This is the buying intent.
Or you have a crystal ball, or you have the magic 8 ball. Should my customer buy today? Yes or no?
Yeah. So if they're visiting your website, but they're not booking the discovery call, it's not the buying intent. If they download PDF, but they don't reply to it, it's not the buying intent, right? So you need to make sense of all the signals and then create the joint playbooks. When we capture that signal. What should be the next meaningful steps that aligned with the level of intent or demand from our buyer? Not what we want, but what's their behavior tells us what should be their next, what are their needs and how can we help them. This is the key. So from that
I love
perspective,
it.
yeah, why it makes sense to track it two ways, right? Let's say if you track it on the account level, you have intent data, for example, right? You have first party intent, you have third party intent. So let's say you capture this, but the truth is that you have no idea which buyer persona execute or demonstrates that behavior, right? That's the key. And the bigger is account, the harder would be identify who is the right buyer persona. That's
Somebody from Microsoft came to our website. I wonder who I need to reach out to. Oh, wait, there's 10,000 people at Microsoft. Exactly.
Exactly. Exactly. That's the this is the exact use case that a lot of companies are dealing with, right? So that's the first thing. Next, like you need to, what when we just discussed this classification of accounts, do we have any previous relationship with this account? Is it just completely newly identified account, right? Or we have a history? Is there a spark, if there is a spike in engagement, or it's just one-time activity, right? So that's the key. So from that perspective, that's why I mentioned you need to define this engagement threshold. So you see there are repetitive visits, etc. Perfect. That means from that time you just need to figure out what department or what business unit, if we are talking about enterprises, is likely to demonstrate that behavior, right? So then you start narrowing down the focus of the sales reps. I mean, the only good thing about intent data that at least you can see the region, right? So you can at least narrow down the buying committee mapping to that specific region where the intent is coming from. And then you say, okay, from that perspective, let's start mapping out potential champions. In this case, I never recommend to start mapping out the decision makers. You'll just waste your time and won't never hear back from them. But it also makes sense to look now at the contact engagement, right? Maybe there are people from these accounts who are signed up to your newsletter, who attended your events in either virtual or in-person events in the past. Again, if you run this gated PDF again, maybe there are some people who downloaded that gated PDF content, whatever, right? And then you start matching this, because from that perspective, that's why we discussed the importance of that RevOps person. This is the person who should be doing this. Then you can say, this is what we have. Next, look at a couple of things. You can say, hey, now when we do the account research, we see that there is a person who worked for our existing customers. So potentially we can just reach out to that person and see the things, right? Looking at these things, looking if they are connected to your partners, right? Maybe if they belong to the same association or membership you are a part of, right? So
multi-threading.
that's the key. This is what I was meaning by account blindness. Quite often, these insights are kind of there in multiple places, and there is no person who can make a holistic overview of all of these interactions, because if all of you see that there was some intent from on the account level, but you miss all of these facts, then you are losing the opportunity. You'll be dealing exactly, but what am I supposed to do? Reaching out to 10K accounts from Microsoft, right? Obviously no. So that's why it should be always two-way. Sometimes you don't see this in intent data, but on contrary, you see there are repetitive engagements on the contact level. People from your strategic account engage, I don't know, with your LinkedIn content, for example, right? Again, this is not the buying intent, but you can reach out, you
It's
can
a
start
signal.
building. Yeah, you can start building the relationship with trying to figure out what are their needs and are they in the market, what is their current journey stage, right? So there should be these things in place.
And that's interesting. That's interesting that you guys point that out as one of the weaknesses in general, how people approach these programs. Because I think that holistic buyer journey, that's what a lot of clients come to Caliber Mind for, being able to see all of those interactions, whether they've been recorded or not, in one place, right? And be able to tell the story and have sales look at the same roadmap. But I also think you said something that is very, to me, that's gold when it comes to thinking about executing ABM. And that's how unique each company is, how unique their data is, and how unique their funnel should be. Because you're absolutely right. It's not a linear funnel that's the same for everyone, where you go from stage to stage based on what a platform tells you those thresholds of engagement should be. It's different for you. It's different for us. It could be different for anyone. But your ability to customize something to your unique buyer journey, whether it's your account funnel, whether it's your person funnel, I think that's what some people may underestimate going into the program. They always find that out on the other side of it when they start measuring, like, oh wait, sales doesn't believe that these are engaged accounts, so these are MQAs. Why do they not believe that? It's because the stage is defined in a way that's contrary to what we know to be true for our business. For example, I'll give you this. In my previous company, we were running a lot of webinars, and this was a government technology company. And in a regular marketing org, you don't even consider a webinar success unless you had 100 plus people signed up, right? I had some webinars with 20 people on them. And if I reported that as such, that we missed the threshold because everybody expects 100 people in a webinar, we only had 20, it would have been a failure story. But what was true for that organization is that the people that came, exclusively the people that came, they would be people from existing deals because they wanted to join live, kick the tires, see what you're all about, how you tell the story about how you solve their problem, right? So I had 20 prospects with open pipe on a webinar. This never happens in the marketing world, but it happened in this company, even though I had to redefine what success was. And what I also found out is that net new accounts would watch those webinars on demand. Accounts with existing pipe would join live. To me, that insight was so instrumental, where I used that as a signal for my stage. If you see someone joining live, which is campaign member in Salesforce joining live, that should be a signal for the account going to that qualified stage. But again, to your point, I think capitalizing on uniqueness of your business and how you go to market in an aligned fashion, where there's trust and all the teams agree on what it should be, I think that's the beginning and the end of your successful ABM.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
No, this is fantastic. Thank you so much. I know we're at the end of the hour, and I really appreciate your insights. I feel like we speak the same language, me being on the practitioner side for so many years, you consulting people, finding a method to the madness. Andrei, my question to you is this: if people wanted to connect with you and ask you more on the topic of best practices in ABM, what would be the best way to connect with you?
They can just type Andrei Zinkevich on LinkedIn and find me.
Fantastic. Andrei, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure of mine as well. Thank you for having me.